Essentially, I'm going to map the user with a key to their data that's on the blockchain. So essentially, there's not going to be any name, address, stuff like that. There'll be like a latitude and longitude, and then all their health data from testing, COVID stuff. Have they been immunized? What have you? All that sort of thing. So what I'm worried about is, can I do that? Is if I remove the PII part, where only the person themselves can access that data that belongs to them and nobody else's, but it all sits out there in mass. Is that something that's even doable? To me, I think it is, but I don't know all the rules. So that's why I ask. Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
It does. If I can.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So, so you're saying that there'll be a geolocation, but no other personally identifying
Correct.
information.
Because we need to have, the geographical, like where they are. That's important.
Right. Well, if that geolocation is identifiable as a residence, as an individual's residence, for instance, that could serve to re-identify the person. And that could
what I was going to do is use as like a zip code and randomize the latitude and longitude.
Okay, so
inside that zip code.
So we wouldn't be able to identify where that person lives or where they spend
exactly where, only their zip code area.
Okay.
And they'll be random. Yeah.
That should be okay. That
cool.
should be okay.
Awesome.
I just thought of that when you were saying that. So nice.
Awesome.
This is Jim. If I could throw in, and David had an excellent summary. I concur with David's commentary about that being a good model. Just in general for blockchain architecture, and to go back to David's excellent summary on the requirements like GDPR and HIPAA, it's a great emphasis, exclamation point, as to why to consider some form of identity, self-sovereign identity, or consent management in your model, because the easiest way to manage an either HIPAA, GDPR, that issue concerning is this data okay and how can it be shared, is to have the user in the middle of it, which of course is the huge paradigm shift we're talking about here in the US.
Yep. And that's exactly what I'm trying to do as well, is put the user back in control of their data. And at first, everybody talks about incentivizing it, and that's great. And I think it'll help the user want to tell the truth more, but I don't think that's the most important. But I've been battling with, how do we get the users to want to participate in these programs?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's a huge cultural problem we're trying to shift in the US. You're absolutely right.
Especially, with our older generation as well, that, they don't even like using the cell phones, let alone computers, to run their information.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And they're willing to just share anything and not necessarily think about, the implications. Well, I talked to my doctor, so it's okay. Right.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Because, agreed.
Then a quick question from the chat I just saw pop up from from PR Vigilance, one of our mentors. He's asking if the zip code info can be cross-referenced with other info in the system that could possibly identify them.
It sure could, and that's something you have to be mindful of. If you start to gather enough of this de-identified information, and there have been studies that show it, you can start to re-identify people with pretty good accuracy. So you have to be careful about how much data you're going to end up divulging to your end user, such that it could be used to re-identify people. And there's no cut and dried answer to that. But for instance, in genomics, they've been able to use publicly accessible information plus data that's gathered through DDC genomics companies to re-identify about 40% of those people.
One of the challenges of this zip coding, and indeed the legitimate claim that even when you hide and hide again and hide again, there are machines, engines that can discover, that it did in fact come from X place. And in the standards community, there are a number of initiatives at the moment, ranging from the Internet Foundation's initiative through to the Universal Postal Union, would you believe, the International Postal and Telecommunications Council's standards body, the United Nations, in the form of what's called IRTI, and then another body, and so on. What I'm saying is W3C is trying to pretend that their identifier, which is internet-based, using an IP address, as it were, can be sufficiently masked that you would not know that that IP address was of this place at this location, whatever. So it's an incredible example of how in the standards community, in order to meet regulatory compliance and mask identities, we found a number of our standards to be somewhat singular in nature, somewhat mundane, somewhat ordinary. When you're asking people or asking sources to divulge a density of data without due protection. So you can pass a law in Congress tomorrow morning that says you can't tell me where Sean Mannion lives. Yeah, cool. But I got news for you. I can find out where Sean Mannion lives in the current engine. So what am I going to do about it? And there's the real rub.
Excellent. And that's it's a good point that sometimes the laws are enacted without any real sense of what is or isn't possible, especially with newer technologies that come in later. It's also important to remember this is a very technical topic, and definitely before anything is ever used that goes live, you need to attend to all of these matters. But you also don't need to be a perfect expert on it in every team to build something. The more you are considering it, the more realistic what you are building has applications that later might need to be adjusted or tweaked, which is why we want to be able to put you together with mentors and teach you a little bit about it. But you don't need to build something that's absolutely perfectly in line with this set of regulations or that, because that's not where we are in this. We're trying to create new ideas with as much real world information as possible, including these components. But I know how intimidating some of this can be, or sort of like, wow, I didn't think it was, I couldn't do this, or I can't do that. Before you go live with things, you got to take a lot of this stuff into account before you're plugging and playing new people's data in there. But in considering what you can do, try to figure it out as best you can, but don't worry about being perfect, I think is important to say.